I, 34-year-old female, have been dating Leon, 42-year-old male, for 2 years. My uncle became friends with Leon when they started working together, and he started coming to family gatherings and birthdays. Leon is a great guy, and we get along instantly. My family always talked to me about Leon, saying he's a great guy. One day, Leon asked me out on a date, and I said yes, so we started dating. Leon has 2 children, a 14-year-old son and a 12-year-old son. His wife died in an accident 9 years ago. Here comes the problem. Leon always talks about his wife. I know it sounds ugly to complain about it, but I don't say it out of jealousy. I mean, it makes me uncomfortable. He mentions her in intimate moments of our time, such as when we finish being intimate or when we're on a date. Sometimes he just starts telling me random anecdotes about his wife, and I just stay there feeling like I'm sleeping with a married man, and I'm the side piece. I don't ask for much, just to have a date where it's just me and him, a date where I don't feel like someone's lover with a man who talks about the things we like. He goes to a psychologist, so according to him, he's working better on his grief, but I doubt it very much. I'm not the first girlfriend he's had after his wife passed away. He still has contact with his wife's family, which is obvious. They are the grandparents of his children, and I have only met them in person one time. All they did was tell me how much Leon and his wife loved each other and treat me really badly. I remember that they put up a video with photos of Leon and his wife when they got married while I was standing there, because they didn't even give me a chair to sit on. I think in their minds it's cute for me to see my boyfriend with his wife. I don't know, it's not cute, it's weird. He always says in front of me that she was the love of his life. I find it cute, but when I think about the future, I'm just like, do I really want to grow old with a man who is making it clear that he will never love me? Is that the kind of love I want? I want to be the only one for my future husband. One time I took him to my favorite place and he just said, "It's beautiful. I wish wife's name was here so we could show her this. You two would have been good friends." It's like being a third wheel in my own relationship. I can tell a lot of situations like these a lot. We talked about this, and most of the times he just says that he does that without thinking. But then he seems to forget about it and goes back to his usual behavior. I'm tired. The only time I talked about this with my family, they told me that a real woman wouldn't be jealous of a dead woman. I'm not jealous. I'm uncomfortable, and would be happy to be with a man who has loved another woman like that, and expect him to love me almost the same. That I shouldn't expect him to love me in the same way since all love is different, and that I should just be empathetic and supportive of him. I listened to them, but nothing got better. I've been feeling so much pressure to go through with this that I can't take it anymore. Anyways, I stopped listening to my family and finally talked with my friend who's a psychologist. She told me that his behavior is not healthy for anyone and that I should think for myself. She texted, "Good for him for loving his wife so much, but you don't deserve to be used as an emotional support doll." And she's right. I have decided to end the relationship. But this year marks 10 years since the death of his wife. Not only his family, but even my family is helping them to host a family reunion in honor of her with the things she liked. I think it's a nice thing to do, but I'm totally ready to end the relationship. However, I'm afraid I will be the bad guy in the story. The 10th anniversary is in July, and I want to end the relationship now, but I fear that I will be a POS piece of if I do that in this year when he is so vulnerable. Even my family is pushing me to act like if I was his wife's best friend. He even says that his wife and I would be good friends if we had met. Why would you want your wife to be best friends with the woman you're sleeping with right now? It's too weird. I think I'm insane because everyone around me sees it as something cute. In short, I don't know if I should break up with him right now or wait until, I don't know, next year? Would I be a POS if I break up with him now? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Stop worrying about timing things for him. Why should you waste any more time on a relationship that is not working for you? The sooner you break up, the sooner everyone can move on. He will never love you enough. His deceased wife's family will never accept you or any woman. They will poison his kids against you no matter how hard you try. But the bottom line is, he is not emotionally available. He has not gotten over the wife. Don't do this to yourself. Just tell him you are sorry, but the relationship is not working for you and block him. Short and to the point without going into detail. Comment 2. I see you being more concerned about his feelings than he is about yours. You know that you're tired of being treated like a second-class citizen, so why would you delay walking away from this emotional vampire? He's slowly sucking the life out of you by using you as a sounding board about his late wife. It's time to think about yourself for a change and do what's best for you. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So here's what's been happening. I decided to wait until after the 10th anniversary of his wife's death to break up with Leon. I thought it would be the kindest thing to do given how emotional this year is for him. But things got even more complicated. A few days after I made that decision, Leon's oldest son, who is 14, got into some trouble at school. He was caught cheating on a test, and it turned into a big deal. Leon was really stressed out about it, and I felt like I couldn't add to his stress by breaking up with him right then. Leon and I had a long talk about his son, and he opened up about how hard it is to be a single parent. He said he feels like he's failing his kids, and that he wishes his wife were still here to help. I felt so bad for him, but at the same time, it made me feel even more like an outsider in my own relationship. I tried to be supportive, but it was hard when all I could think about was how I wanted to end things. Then Leon's younger son, who is 12, started acting out too. He got into a fight at school and was suspended for a week. Leon was at his wit's end, and I felt like I had to be there for him. I spent a lot of time at his house, helping with the kids and trying to keep things together. It was exhausting, and I started to feel like I was losing myself in his problems. One night, after the kids were in bed, Leon and I were sitting on the couch, and he started talking about his wife again. He said he felt like he was betraying her by being with me, and that he didn't know if he could ever love anyone the way he loved her. It was like a punch to the gut. I knew then that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I decided that I had to break up with him, no matter what. But before I could do it, something else happened. Leon's wife's parents came to visit, and they brought a bunch of old photos and videos of her. They wanted to show them to the kids and reminisce about the good times. I felt so out of place, like I didn't belong there at all. They kept talking about how wonderful she was and how much Leon loved her. It was like they were trying to erase me from the picture. I tried to talk to Leon about how I was feeling, but he just brushed it off. He said that his wife's parents were just trying to keep her memory alive for the kids, and that I should understand that. I felt so alone and unsupported. I knew then that I couldn't wait any longer. I had to end things. So I finally broke up with Leon. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. He was devastated, and so were his kids. They didn't understand why I was leaving, and I felt like the worst person in the world. But I knew I had to do it for my own sanity. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his dead wife. The fallout was intense. My family was furious with me. They said I was being selfish and that I should have stuck it out for Leon's sake. They didn't understand how much I was hurting. Leon's wife's parents were also angry. They said I was abandoning Leon and the kids when they needed me the most. It was like everyone was against me. I moved out of Leon's house and got my own place. It was a relief to have my own space again, but it was also really lonely. I missed Leon and the kids, even though I knew I had made the right decision. I started seeing a therapist to help me deal with everything. She helped me realize that I had been putting Leon's needs ahead of my own for too long, and that it was okay to take care of myself. As I started to rebuild my life, I thought a lot about why I had stayed with Leon for so long. I realized that I had been trying to prove something to myself and to my family. I wanted to show them that I could be strong and supportive, even in the face of difficult circumstances. But in the process, I had lost sight of what I really wanted and needed. I also thought a lot about Leon and his kids. I hoped that they would be okay without me, and that Leon would find a way to move on from his wife's death. I knew it would be a long and difficult journey for him, but I hoped that he would eventually find happiness again. Looking back, I can see that there were warning signs from the beginning. Leon's constant talk about his wife, his inability to fully commit to our relationship, and his reliance on me for emotional support were all red flags. But I ignored them because I wanted to believe that things would get better. I wanted to believe that I could be the one to help him heal. In the end, I learned a lot about myself and what I need in a relationship. I need someone who can fully commit to me and who can support me as much as I support them. I need someone who can see me for who I am, not just as a replacement for someone else. And most importantly, I need to take care of myself and not lose sight of my own needs and desires. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for confronting my violent brother and dragging him to therapy? When he relapsed, my brother has always been an angry, hot-headed individual. Since he was a small child, he showed violent behavior, idolized gangs, and would just generally be unpleasant to everyone. He's the kind of person who goes on about respecting him and tries to intimidate everyone just because he can. When he was a teenager, it escalated dramatically, and our parents tried everything they could to fix it. He started using drugs when he was 16 years old. By the time he was 19, he went to prison for 2 years. Prison changed him. After he got out, he was not the same person. He flinched when you touched him, slept with the lights on, and added an extra lock to the door of his room when he stayed with my parents. He was broken. He eventually had a full-blown mental breakdown where he started talking about what happened. It was as bad as you expected. His combative nature isolated him from day one and made him a target for all kinds of abuse throughout his entire sentence. He's been in therapy for years. He's 32 years old now. He went back to school, met a nice woman, and is actually turning his life around. Our relationship isn't perfect, and it will never be fully healed, but he's trying to actually be a human being. The problem has been the last couple of months. You can see it on his face, the way he acts. He's slowly reverting to his old ways. He acts aggressive around mom and dad. When he's out, he tries to pick fights again. The people he hangs around with are known violent felons and suspected dealers. He had a girlfriend for about a year, but she left him because he started frequently screaming, throwing things around their apartment, and threatening to hurt her. It's obvious he's on drugs again. He's slowly unraveling and throwing away years of progress. Our parents tried talking to him. They offered rehab and for him to stay with them for some time. He flipped out at our parents, and after years of his behavior, they simply walked away and blocked him for the time being. They spent years and countless dollars before and after his sentence to try to help him. They were done. I tried talking to him. His place was a mess, and he had empty alcohol bottles and pill containers scattered around his place. He got hostile very quickly when I pointed out the obvious and threatened me. I snapped and brought up what he told us about his prison time and told him it would all be waiting for him again if he doesn't fix his situation, and that this time his family won't be waiting to help clean up his mess. It shut him down very quickly, and he just curled up on the couch and weakly told me to leave. I felt terrible since I brought it up, but he is gladly throwing away years of progress for the same behavior that got him in trouble in the first place. He knows what prison is like, and he's doing everything he can to go back there. He's spitting in the face of everyone who went to bat for him, chasing the same highs that almost destroyed his life. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot for pointing out to your brother that drugs and violence will land them back in prison again. You can recommend getting help before he digs himself in further. Make sure he knows that the reason you told him what you said was that you were worried about him, care about him, and that you are not trying to hurt him. Comment 2. OP, you are not wrong. Sooner or later, your brother will end up back in prison because of his behaviors. Reminding him of the consequences was an attempt to steer him on the right path. At the moment, it would appear you failed. But don't give up hope just yet. Not the idiot. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through all this. So after that last confrontation, I didn't hear from my brother for a couple of days. I was worried, but I also felt like I needed to give him some space. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from his girlfriend. She was frantic, saying he had shown up at her place in the middle of the night, completely out of it. He was banging on her door, yelling incoherently, and she was scared out of her mind. She didn't want to call the cops because she knew it would only make things worse, so she called me instead. I rushed over there, and when I got to her apartment, he was sitting on the steps outside, looking like a ghost of himself. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was shaking. I managed to get him into my car, and we drove around for a while. He was mostly silent, but every now and then he'd mumble something about how he couldn't escape his past. It was heartbreaking to see him like that, but I knew I had to do something. I took him back to my place and let him crash on the couch. The next morning, I called his therapist and explained what had happened. They agreed to see him on an emergency basis, and I managed to convince my brother to go. The session was intense. He broke down completely, admitting that he felt like he was losing control and didn't know how to stop it. The therapist suggested a more intensive treatment program, something that would give him the support he needed to get back on track. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. While we were at the therapist's office, my brother got a call from one of his old friends. This guy was bad news, someone my brother had known from his darker days. He was in trouble and needed help. My brother was torn. On one hand, he knew he needed to focus on his own recovery, but on the other hand, he felt a sense of loyalty to this friend. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Against my better judgment, I let him go meet this friend, but I insisted on going with him. We drove to a sketchy part of town, and when we got there, it was clear that things were worse than we thought. His friend was in deep with some dangerous people, and they were looking for payback. My brother tried to talk to them, but it quickly escalated into a shouting match. I was terrified, but I couldn't just leave him there. In the heat of the moment, my brother did something I never expected. He stepped in front of me and told these guys that if they wanted to hurt his friend, they'd have to go through him first. It was like a switch had flipped. For the first time in a long time, he was standing up for something other than his own self-destructive tendencies. It was a risky move, but it worked. The guys backed off, and we managed to get his friend out of there. After that, my brother was a mess. He was shaking and on the verge of a breakdown, but there was also a glimmer of something else in his eyes. It was like he had finally realized that he couldn't keep living like this. We drove back to my place in silence, and when we got there, he collapsed on the couch and started sobbing. It was the first time I'd seen him cry in years. Over the next few days, things were tense. My brother was still struggling, but he seemed more open to getting help. He agreed to check into the intensive treatment program, and I helped him pack his things. It was a bittersweet moment. On one hand, I was relieved that he was finally taking steps to get better. But on the other hand, I knew it was going to be a long and difficult road. In the midst of all this, I found out something that shed new light on my brother's behavior. While going through some old family photos, I came across a letter from our dad to my brother. It was written while he was in prison, and it was full of regret and apologies. Our dad admitted that he had been too hard on my brother growing up, trying to toughen him up instead of understanding him. He expressed his own struggles with anger and how he saw too much of himself in my brother. It was a raw and honest letter, and it made me realize that my brother's issues were deeply rooted in our family dynamics. I showed the letter to my brother, and it hit him hard. He had always felt like he was fighting against the world, but seeing our dad's words made him realize that he wasn't alone in his struggles. It was a small step, but it helped him start to come to terms with his past. As he settled into the treatment program, I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders, bit by bit. He still had a long way to go, but there was a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. Our parents, though still keeping their distance, were cautiously optimistic. They knew that this was his battle to fight, but they were ready to support him if he showed he was serious about changing. So, that's where things stand now. My brother is in treatment, and for the first time in a long time, it feels like there's a chance for him to turn things around. It's not going to be easy, and there are no guarantees, but at least he's trying. And maybe, just maybe, this time it will stick. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to let my husband use my car after he refused to help me get it? Last July, when I was 7 months pregnant, my vehicle's head gasket blew. I was on restrictions and partial bed rest due to preeclampsia, so the need for a vehicle wasn't all that big. I sold off the vehicle. I gave birth in September. And here it is 10 months later, and I was just able to buy myself a vehicle. In those 10 months of me not having a vehicle, I was trapped in the house constantly. I think that I only left this house maybe 10 times, and at least 7 of them were doctor's appointments. I always had to wait around for my husband to get out of work to drive me somewhere, and half the time he didn't want to because he was too tired from work or already had plans. Because he was the only one with a vehicle and worked so often, 6 days a week usually. He would always hit the grocery store when we needed food before coming home. Or like he was the one to go to the laundromat, our rental has no hookup. And it got to a point where he started resenting me for it, even though it was outside of my control. Every single time we argued, he would bring up the fact that he was doing everything after busting his butt all week while I did nothing. I'm the default parent. I do all the cooking here, all the cleaning, all the planning, all the baby care. He will change an occasional diaper, and I still bring in income and pay half the bills, work from home. But either way, he has still brought up the whole, I worked all freaking week and do everything talk whenever he can squeeze it into an argument over anything. It started to slowly but surely wreck me mentally. I stopped asking him for anything. Even if I needed help, I refused to ask him. We are now starting to get better, but not by much. Now, the issue is that I literally bought my vehicle in March, and he hasn't been able to find time to bring me to go get it. Bought it off a family member. So I paid $2,500 for a vehicle that I haven't been able to touch at all. I've tried getting my vehicle without asking him, but I've had no luck. Well, he comes home pissed off yesterday and says, "We are going to get your vehicle this weekend. My Subaru is starting to overheat and stall out, so I'm going to park it and sell it, and I need a vehicle for work." There was no, "Hey, can I use your vehicle?" It was just him straight up telling me he was using my vehicle. So he couldn't be bothered to help me grab it when it was convenient for me, but now that it's convenient for him, he can find time. I told him that I don't want him using it. I don't want to be trapped in this house anymore. I want to be able to go do shoot on my own without having to ask him for anything, just so he can use it against me. He says, "I have told you several times that I'm sorry and that I truly don't mind doing everything that I do. Me getting to and from work is a bit more important than feelings." But I still don't want him using it at all. His job is 5 minutes down the street, and his boss is our neighbor. He can catch a ride. He says he doesn't want to be on someone else's time and needs his own vehicle, and that I'm making this a big deal when it doesn't have to be. Am I the jerk? Would I be the jerk if I continued to tell him that no, he's not using my vehicle because he has destroyed me mentally by using everything against me, and I no longer want to depend on him or be trapped here? Despite him having apologized several times, I can't let it go because of how frequently it had been mentioned. To add, I told him I could drive him to and from work. He said that wouldn't work for him because he needs the vehicle to drive to the store during his lunch break and needs to drive between job sites. He doesn't like carpooling because it makes him feel trapped. Ironic. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. No idiots here. He was the jerk for leaving you at home with the baby without a vehicle. And he's the jerk now for trying to do the same thing all over again. I went through this exact situation where I traded in my vehicle and got a car for my partner and I to share because she was pregnant, and I carpooled with my neighbor for 6 months until I saved up enough to buy another vehicle. If he keeps you without a vehicle, he has a type of control over you where you have to rely on him for most things. If you take away that dependency, what does he have to offer? Comment 2. Not the idiot. It's one thing to imagine that you would be denying him use of your car when he truly had no other option for getting to and from work. It's quite another that he seems to think it's fine to just sell his car and not get another one for himself and just take yours over. The disrespect here is huge. That said, I don't quite understand why you weren't able to pick up your vehicle yourself without his help since March. Now, for the update, thanks for all the comments from the last post. So, here's what happened next. After our argument about the vehicle, things were tense. I could feel the resentment building up again, and it was like we were back to square one. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called my brother and asked if he could help me pick up the car. He agreed, and we planned to go the next day. When I told my husband, he seemed annoyed but didn't say much. He just grumbled something about how he hoped the car was in good shape since it had been sitting for so long. The next day, my brother and I went to get the car. It was a relief to finally have it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of another battle. When I got home, my husband was already there, waiting. He looked at the car and then at me, and I could see the frustration in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just walked back into the house. That night, we had another argument. He accused me of being selfish and not understanding how hard he worked. I told him that I was tired of being trapped in the house and that I needed my independence. He said that he needed the car for work and that I was being unreasonable. It was a stalemate, and neither of us was willing to back down. The next day, I decided to take the car out for a drive. I needed to clear my head and think about what to do next. As I was driving, I thought about all the times he had made me feel like I was a burden. I thought about how he had used my dependence on him against me and how it had affected my mental health. I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I needed to stand up for myself and take control of my life. When I got home, I told him that I was going to use the car for myself, and that he would have to find another way to get to work. He was furious. He said that I was being selfish and that I didn't care about his needs. I told him that I did care, but that I needed to take care of myself too. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The next few days were tough. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only to argue. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to avoid another blow-up, but I knew that I had made the right decision. I needed to take control of my life and not let him dictate my every move. One night, after another heated argument, he finally broke down. He admitted that he was scared. He said that he felt like he was losing control and that he didn't know how to handle it. He said that he was sorry for how he had treated me and that he wanted to make things right. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. We decided to sit down and talk things through. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also a necessary one. We both realized that we needed to make some changes if we wanted our relationship to work. We agreed that he would find another way to get to work, and that I would use the car for myself. He talked to his boss, who agreed to give him a ride to work. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. We also agreed to work on our communication and to be more supportive of each other. As we were talking, he opened up about his childhood. He told me about how his father had always been hard on him and how he had always felt like he had to prove himself. He said that he didn't want to be like his father, but that he sometimes felt like he was turning into him. It was a revelation that helped me understand him better, and it made me realize that we both had our own issues to work through. In the days that followed, things started to improve. We were both making an effort to be more understanding and supportive of each other. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension, but we were making progress. I felt like we were finally on the right track. But then, something happened that tested our newfound resolve. My husband got a call from his boss, who told him that he needed to travel to a different job site for a few days. It was too far for his boss to give him a ride, and he needed the car. I could see the panic in his eyes as he told me about it. He was worried that I would say no and that he would be stuck. I had a decision to make. I could stand my ground and refuse to let him use the car, or I could let him use it and risk falling back into the same pattern. It was a difficult choice, but I knew that I needed to trust him and give him a chance to prove himself. I told him that he could use the car, but that we needed to have a plan in place for when he got back. We agreed that he would look into getting his car fixed or finding another solution. It was a compromise, but it was one that we both felt good about. As he drove away, I felt a mix of emotions. I was nervous about what the future held, but I was also hopeful. We had both made mistakes, but we were also both committed to making things work. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.